Sorry, there's just something. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Gene Colthouse. I'm presiding member for this Metro Outer Development Assessment Panel meeting today. I'll open the meeting at 9:32 a.m. and in doing so, I'll acknowledge that we are hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respects to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters, and community. The meeting will be run in accordance with DAP Standing Orders 2024 under the Planning and Development Assessment Panel Regulations 2011. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website in accordance with Regulation 42A of the Planning and Development Assessment Panels Regulations 2011, and members are reminded to announce their name and title prior to speaking. During the meeting, panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. Today, present at the meeting from the City of Cockburn are Councillor Tom Wodenberg and Councillor Michael Saperovich, and from the City of Swan, Councillor Jennifer Catalano and Councillor Charlie Zanino. On the panel today, Mr. Clayton Heim to my left, Deputy Presiding Member, and Heidi Hergert, who is online as the specialist member. Apologies today from Councillor Phoebe Cork and Councillor Rod Henderson, Councillor Cork from the City of Cockburn and Councillor Henderson from the City of Swan. Councillor Henderson is on leave of absence. And item 4 on the agenda, we note that minutes of previous meetings are on the DAP website. Moving to part B of the agenda, we have an application from the City of Cockburn. And in moving into this section, I'll ask all panel members on this item that they have duly considered all of the documentation contained within Part B of the agenda and Part B related information by raising your hands, please. Thank you. Disclosures of interest, I haven't received any at this stage. Do any other members have other items to disclose? No. And councillors, was this item considered at a council meeting at all?
No.
Okay, thank you.
No, it hasn't been.
Thank you, councillors. Okay, we're moving to item 3 on the agenda, which is the application. And first thing we have is a presentation from Mr. Nathan Mass from Planning Solutions. Take a seat, Nathan, and I'll remind you that you have 3 minutes for your presentation.
Well, thank you, Presiding Member, and good morning to the panel members and local government officers. I'm Nathan Mars, Senior Planner from Planning Solutions, and I'll be speaking in support of the proposed self-storage development at 106 Barrington Street in Bibra Lake. I'm also joined by Paul from Irby, as well as representatives of the proponent who are online, and will be available to answer any questions following my deputation today. The place's development is recommended for approval. We work collaboratively with the City during this assessment process, which is clearly reflected in the positive recommendation of the panel, to the panel today. I would like to thank the City's planning team for their assessment. We've reviewed the proposed conditions from the City's officers and we're fully supportive of these. We do not request any changes and consider them to be standard for development of this nature. Notwithstanding, I would like to walk through some of the merits of this proposal. Foremost, this development provides an essential service and amenity in the locality. And our city continues to densify and we start seeing more smaller dwellings. Self-storage units become an increasingly important function of our city. Our proposal has been designed in contemporary nature and in a site-responsive way. This includes the built form and materiality that reflects prevailing light industrial character of the locality, with landscaping providing a soft interface and transition to the adjoining streets. The building setbacks and height are entirely consistent with the adjoining development, and access and manoeuvrability has been holistically considered. Development has also been demonstrated to be satisfactory from a bushfire, stormwater, and site levels perspective. All in all, we are supportive of the officer's recommendation. We thank them for their assessment and working with us over the last few months. We consider this development works well for this site and will be a valuable facility for the surrounding community for years to come. We respectfully request the panel support proposed development today as proposed by the officers. I'll be pleased to answer any questions from the panel.
Thank you, Nathan. Panel members, are there any questions? Councillors?
No, not from me.
Thank you. Heidi, you have a question?
I did that attendant to the traffic engineer. Just a couple of questions. The waste management, was a waste management plan done, and how are waste trucks actually collecting rubbish from the site?
Okay, that's one question. Who wishes to answer that? Your traffic engineer, is he?
Yes, all's online. Yes, just otherwise I can.
Mr. Gantus? Nathan, you might.
Hello.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I had to be promoted to a panelist, so it took a few seconds. Thanks for your time today. I believe the question was about the waste collection. So we have I don't know if a waste management plan was prepared. We only prepared a transport impact statement for the development, but in terms of swept path analysis, we had to check the swept paths for trucks to access the site, just for the self-storage component for trucks to be able to enter and park in loading zones. And there's actually a loading bay next to the bin store. So it's at the northern corner of the site. You've got a bin store there, and then there's a loading bay next to it. So what we would envisage is that trucks would enter from the southern crossover and drive north internally, and then park in forward gear in the loading bay. And then the bins would be put to the back. So we would be using a rear loader waste truck. And so the bins would be emptied, and then that truck would reverse back and then turn right to exit from the northern crossover.
Okay.
That's my understanding just from experience. Yeah, happy for anyone else in the team to provide input on that.
Okay. I have another question through the chair.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Just looking at the swept paths, your heavier vehicles, so the medium rigid and the heavy rigids, are entering via the south and exiting via the north. What management protocols potentially would be in place to ensure or minimize conflict between parked vehicles and these heavier vehicles maneuvering on the site?
I don't think there's no specific management protocol, because it's people dropping things off for the self-storage. So what we checked is we just wanted to make sure that the heavy vehicles, when they're maneuvering, they don't need to cross into parking zones or parking bays, because that would be one of the potential conflicts in terms of maybe the truck movement would get blocked. But yeah, the way that we've prepared the swept paths, it's the truck can get in and out of the loading zone without needing to enter the parking zone. So you've got that physical separation, and it's a self-storage. So usually there's no, I guess, traffic. I don't know what kind of traffic management protocols you mean. It's just a self-managed self-storage facility.
I'm looking at the swept path, just the singular movement of entering, traveling through, and then exiting seems to avoid the parking area, but vehicles that are entering and then backing into what's designated as a 3-bay loading zone when they're exiting, there's quite a significant swept path on the right-hand wheel path that there's potentially conflict with the parking zone on the near side of the, I guess, office building, I suppose. Just the blue, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that the blue line is the 300 to 500 mil offset from the wheelbase.
Right. It's from
So,
the vehicle body, though. It's
from
a
the vehicle
500,
body, okay.
yeah, 500 millimeters clearance from the vehicle body. So the green line is the vehicle body, and blue line is the clearance.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. You're
Okay,
welcome.
thank you. Are there any further questions of the applicants? Oh, Clayton? Okay. All right. Thank you. Do the council staff have any comments to make as a result of the questions?
Yeah, thank you, presiding member. I just wanted to hopefully just add a little bit further to some of the questions that were just raised about the waste management plan in particular. I think one of the questions was a waste management plan approved? The city's waste services team did not really expect one in this case. We usually would, depending on the specific land use, and in some cases we would request a waste management plan for industrial uses, but particularly when the proponent opts in for private collection, it's not usually as of much concern to us as compared to if it was the city collecting the waste. And given the land use being self-storage facility, our waste services don't anticipate that to be a particular land use that generates a lot of waste. A lot of the waste would most likely come from the staff through their administrative work rather than there's no production going on site or anything like that. So our waste services team were comfortable for this to proceed without a waste management plan. So hopefully that just adds a little bit more context to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, panel members, do any of you have questions of the council staff?
No.
Yes, Clayton?
The condition 22, can you explain why that's a planning condition and not simply an advice note? I can't see the planning basis for it.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Member. We often do put this on as a planning approval being prior to the issue of the building permit, and the reason for that is because depending on the size of the system that is required and the specifications of it, for example, whether it's going to be trafficable lids or where it's going to be located on the site, depending on the site and soil analysis, it does have the potential for that to impact the design of the building. So once the studies are undertaken and the size of the system is determined, it, for example, might have no other location where it could go except for where the building currently is. So if we have that as a DA condition and it's negotiated and sorted out prior to the building permit, then it's going to avoid a situation where development starts or detailed plans are already commenced, and then all of a sudden we have to change everything because the on-site wastewater disposal system has to be located in a place where we weren't anticipating it to be. That's why we prefer to have this on as a DA condition, so that that can be sorted before the proponent has to put out significant resources to get detailed designs done up.
In condition...
So Clayton, I just have a query on that condition. You say that the application to install on-site effluent disposal system must be lodged with the city's health service and or the Department of Health. I'm just wondering on that, if the words and/or Department of Health are deleted and it's only to the council, if they then have to apply to the Department of Health, that would be under different legislation, would it?
Not necessarily. My understanding is that the Department of Health, it's the same legislation that deals with it. It's just whether it's to the Department of Health or whether it's the city depends on the capacity and the number of wastewater treatment units. So if more than one is required, then the city cannot approve that and it will have to go to the Chief Health Officer at the Department of Health. It's the same legislation that deals with it, but just which body actually determines that, it depends on the size of the system and the number of the systems. So because we don't have that upfront right now, it's probably better just to have and/or the Department of Health. Happy to have a footnote that maybe explains that, but that's the reason why it's and/or Department of Health.
Okay, I'm probably thinking that the condition itself should be an advice note rather than that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. In relation to condition 24, you talk about the signage is to be maintained and not offensive in nature. Is that not offensive defined anywhere in policy or whatever?
I don't think the word offensive is defined, but our local planning policy does stipulate that it uses that wording, that signage shall not be offensive in nature. I don't think our policy defines what offensive is. I would probably just take it that it's the sort of general meaning of the word. But again, happy to maybe have a footnote that clarifies what offensive would be. But my first instinct would be it's probably, swear words come to mind. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks. I think what's offensive to one person isn't necessarily offensive to another, and that's half the problem, I think. But anyway, that's fine. Are you aware that in your advice notes D and E, they are a repeat of conditions 10 and 15 respectively?
Thank you. Yes, happy for advice notes D and E to be removed if the panel agree.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Okay, any further questions of the staff? If not, thank you. To enable us to discuss and debate the item, we'll move into that now, and in order to do so, I need a mover and seconder for the recommendation as published. Moved Councillor Separovich and seconded Heidi Hurd. Councillor, could you speak to the item, please?
Yeah, I'm not even sure why this would be coming to that meeting, why it wasn't just approved by the officers, but I suppose it does come down to the discretion of the proponent whether or not they wish to go through the DAP process in order to apply for a project like this. But it's the most unassuming development I've seen in the Bibra Lake area in quite a while. It's easy. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Heidi is seconded. Do you wish to speak to the item? You're on mute, I think, at the moment. Still on mute. I can hear you now. Thanks.
Now, okay. All right. I'm in support of the item. I think it's an appropriate use for the area in which it's situated. The design spatially obviously from an access perspective.
You've dropped
Still hear
out,
me?
Heidi.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Yep, sorry. I think the spatial design in the context of the local road network and access to and from that local road network is appropriate. I think in the traffic and the heavy vehicles and other demands associated with that can be accommodated comfortably during both the peak hour and on a daily basis. And I support it for that reason.
Thank you very much. Other panel members wish to speak? Councillor Weidenbach.
No, all from me.
Thank you, Mr. Home.
Thank you. Yes, look, I support this proposal as well. It's a permitted use. and apart from some relatively minor setback and signage variations, it satisfies the intent and objective scheme and the industrial subdivision and development policy. It's a very large building fronting a major road, and while I note that industrial development doesn't go to design review panels, I think this one could have benefited from a design review panel consideration. It is quite, as I say, a very large building fronting a major road, and I think there are some issues along that frontage from my point of view, but I'm not prepared to sort of go down that refusal or deferral path. I'm happy to support it with the conditions as proposed. Apart from, I would like to recommend that condition 22 be deleted from the conditions and put in as an advice note.
So Neil moving that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Separovich, thank you. Clayton, speak to that amendment.
Well, I think it's self-explanatory. I don't believe it is a planning condition with a planning purpose or planning basis. I think it's best put in as an advice note so they or the applicants understand that they need to look at that requirement as part of their building licence process.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Separovich, you wish to speak to that amendment? No? Any other panel member? If not, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you.
And then to delete advice notes D and E because they are repeats of conditions.
Thank you. That's moved as amendment number 2 to the recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Separovich, thank you. Clayton, wish to speak to the item at all? Councillor Separovich, wish to speak to the item? Any other panel member wish to speak to the item? If not, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you.
That's it.
That's it. Okay. All right. Any other panel members wish to speak? I will just say that I support the item and the amendments to the recommendation. Issues such as setbacks, general appearance of the building, parking, traffic and access have all been covered. So I'm in support of it. That being the case, Councillor Separovich has moved it. Do you wish to say anything further on the item?
No, it's perfectly fine, thanks.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll put the recommendation as amended with the 2 amendments. All those in favour? Against? None. That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, moving on in this part of the agenda, item 4, Form 2 DAP application, there are none. Item 5, Section 31 SAT reconsideration, there are none. Councillor Weidenbauer and Councillor Separovich, thank you very much for your attendance to the meeting and participation, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thank you. See you later.
Thank you all.
Okay, move on to part C of the agenda, the City of Swan, and welcome Councillor Catalano and Councillor Zanino. At this point, item 1 is a declaration of due consideration, and if all panel members have duly considered all of the documentation contained within part C of the agenda and part C related information, including a R13 direction response received on the 12th of May 2025 and a and a follow-up written submission we received late yesterday from the Department of Education. Please indicate by raising your hands, please. Thank you. That's unanimous. Okay. Disclosures of interest. We haven't received any at this point in time. councillors, was this item considered at a council meeting at all?
No.
No? Okay, thank you. All right, well, we have the application before us for a service station motor vehicle wash at lot 5002 Squadron Boulevard, Bullsbrook. We do have presentations from three members, three persons. Firstly, Councillor Cameron Loebgott from Urbis. You're speaking against the recommendation. I remind you, you have 3 minutes to make your presentation. We have all had your presentations and duly considered them before the meeting.
Good morning, panel members. I'm here today to represent our client, Fabcot, who are the landowners and the developer of the Kingford Town Centre. And I'm here to strongly support the proposed service station and car wash at part lot 5002 Squadron Boulevard, Bullsbrook. This development is a critical component of the Kingford Town Centre precinct plan, designed to meet the future commercial needs of the locality and its residents. Despite the City of Swan's recommendation for refusal, we believe this proposal perfectly aligns with the strategic vision for the area. The proposal perfectly aligns with State Planning Policy 4.2. Kingford is a designated district town centre aimed at servicing the daily and weekly needs of residents. This proposal provides essential commercial services and creates employment opportunities, reinforcing its suitability for the area. The proposal is consistent with the Bullsbrook District Structure Plan. The Bullsbrook District Structure Plan allocates as a district centre zoning to the proposal, supporting the provision of commercial services, making the development entirely appropriate for the site. The proposal adheres to the Kingford Town Centre precinct plan. This zones the site as service commercial with guiding principles that include service commercial, fast food and petrol stations. The proposal meets these criteria, providing necessary services and employment opportunities. As outlined in the City of Swan's planning RAR, the proposal respects and complies with the built form and design principles of the local development plan and the precinct plans. The development complies with all the built form requirements, demonstrating its suitability for the site. The site will support a car-dependent use. 71% of the Bullsbrook residents travel to work by car, which was taken from the 2021 census, and a service station is essential to support these needs. The proposal exceeds landscaping requirements for the site, which is optimal for a commercial and a service station in a greenfield setting. And the site is consistent with all the access points identified in the local development plan, which was supported and approved by the City of Swan. And the service centre and car wash will act as a catalyst for further future commercial developments within the Kingford Town Centre precinct by providing essential services that attract more businesses and residents, fostering a vibrant and thriving centre. In addition, I note that the RAR recommendation is a refusal. However, the DRP shouldn't be a decision maker in relation to the development application, and it should act as a tool to assist in the development application. The development is for a service station, a Coltex, which has a nationwide design standard, which have been adhered to, consistent with the recent approvals of McDonald's and a childcare development in the area. To conclude, the proposed service station and car wash is a positive and necessity for the site. It complies with the relevant planning and development controls and aligns perfectly with the strategic goals of the Kingford Town Centre precinct plan. I strongly urge the development assessment panel today to approve this development, supporting the continued growth and enhancement of the Bullsbrook area. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Are you all doing separately or as a team? So whether we just...
I'm separate to that.
You are? Okay. Panel members, are there any questions of Mr. Loebgott?
Yes, German. Oh, that's all right.
Any questions? Councillor Catalano got a hand up? No? Okay, all right then. Yes, Clayton.
All right. Why wasn't the potential vapour impacts on the surrounding area, particularly the school, why weren't they considered in more detail by the applicant?
I believe in the RAR report, the City of Swan supported all the technical information, including vapor and on the adjoining school site, and they identified it as a licence that is required to be obtained separate to a planning approval.
No further.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor.
I don't know whether you're, able to answer the question, but one of the main reasons for recommending refusal by the city was that you obviously couldn't conform with the design principles. Is there any valid reason why you couldn't do that?
I'm not representing the applicant on this one. I'm separate to the proponent.
Okay.
I can comment on that if you like. It's a service station, a Caltex, and yeah, I find it hard to believe that it needed a DRP for the service station, in my opinion.
Okay, any further questions? If not, thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll take it on board with the next presenter, Ross. Reece Kelly.
Thank you, members, for the opportunity to speak today in objection to the recommendation before you. Just in relation to the two questions asked, I can answer those questions for you separately if you like, once we've finished that presentation. I'm Reece Kelly. I am a director of Forest Highway Developments Proprietary Limited, who is the purchaser of the site from Fabcot. We are an experienced developer in relation to developing petrol stations and service stations, fast food, etc. So we are very mindful of what the requirements are in terms of the necessity to comply with various environmental planning, traffic requirements. We note that the proposed use has been dealt with at the high level of the master plan, the structure plan, and within the local account planning scheme. What's perplexing to me is when you go through the RAR, it appears that the council staff are in support of the application. They continually state, additionally, the development provides service to the local needs of the community and provide local employment opportunities. The city staff are satisfied that the proposed development is appropriate and aligns with land use envisaged for the site. The proposed setbacks from Supported Boulevard is appropriate in the context of built form. The proposal complies with the relevant provisions pertaining to site coverage, provision of landscaping, refuse area, and proposed development is overall consistent with the built form requirements. Subject size of local development plan, the proposal is considered to comply with the built form requirements of the LDP. The proposed development satisfies the built form provisions of the LDP. Proposed signage is deemed appropriate and the city staff concur with the traffic impact assessment. The proposed development is an appropriate use of the site in the context of its surroundings and the approved structure plan. Finally, the City of Swan staff are satisfied all off-site impacts, including odour, noise, light emissions and risk, have been adequately addressed. In relation to that, we note that the late response from the Department of Education yesterday and concerns about odour. We have provided environmental advice to this, and we confirm that the site, whilst it has been addressed at a structure planning level and the proposed use has been deemed appropriate in its location adjacent to the sensitive land uses, that the setbacks that we have actually done in terms of the design layout complies with the relevant guidelines of the Department of Environment and DPOR. So we also note that we've taken a worst case scenario, and that's the assumption that the school is going to be building buildings up to the boundary of the school. So we've addressed that, we believe, satisfactorily. In relation to the reasons for refusal, the city staff don't appear to actually have undertaken their own assessment of the 10 design principles. They've solely relied on the design review panel. The design review panel is purely there to be an advisory board, and we don't believe that the design review panel has been independent and impartial in this situation. I've continued throughout the application process to refer to the fact that the site is not an appropriate use, regardless of what the actual overall structure plan identifies this as an appropriate use for the site. Furthermore, they go on to have personal biases and state that they do not support further development of service stations because it is inherently unsustainable as so far as it services legacy vehicles, internal combustion engine uses and supports car usage. The site has been identified for a petrol station and it requires it to be a car use dominated use. They go on to say that we need to work harder because we're not proposed to be a childcare centre in the location. The site's not identified as a childcare centre, it's identified as service commercial and identified for a service station under the structure plan. Regardless of that, we have worked harder. We have complied with all of the requirements of the town planning scheme. We have not asked for a single discretion. We've increased setbacks, we've increased landscaping, and we've analysed to ensure that we are compliant with the sensitive land uses of the school nearby in terms of odour, light and noise. Finally, we've also looked at the comments about that it's not appropriate in the rural setting. We amended our design of the car wash to create a more rural looking building at the advice of the design review panel. They've come back and said that's not satisfactory. When we compare that to the McDonald's, the gym and the childcare centre, we feel that we have gone far over and above what would be required to make sure that this is compliant with the rural setting. And in fact, we actually increased our setbacks to greater than what's already been approved and what's been set as precedent by the design review panel, the JDAP and the council. So finally, we would ask that we have assessed this against the 10 design principles. We believe we are compliant with that. The design review panel has taken a personal bias. They have not considered what the planning framework is and considered that the design principles are in consideration of the planning framework. As such, we would strongly request that the panel reject the recommendation for refusal and look at the alternative recommendation for approval with the conditions proposed by council. I'm happy to take questions after my colleague Ross takes his deputation if that's preferred by the panel.
Okay, I think it would be good seeing as you're both sort of covering a lot of the same ground. Do you wish to speak?
I do. Thank you, presiding member. My name is Ross Underwood. I'm a principal and co-owner of Planning Solutions and the applicant for this proposal. Thank you for the opportunity to address that today. And I won't repeat what Reece has said, and I take it that my presentation summary that was circulated prior has been received and read, and I certainly don't intend to read word for word what was off that. To your point on the previous proposal, Deputy Presiding Member, I certainly agree that there is value in the DRP process. It improves design outcomes and it results in outcomes which are better for users of developments and better for users of within the community. So it doesn't bring me any pleasure whatsoever to be in this particular scenario and come here to say what I am about to say. And that is that while a well-conducted DRP operates independently and with impartiality, we don't believe that that's the case here. At the very first DRP session, which I'd attended, the first thing that was said to us was that it was unfortunate for us as we were not involved in previous discussions between the centre developer and the DRP in the design and layout of the centre, and that there would be impacts on development outcomes that have been promised through those previous discussions that impact on what we are now proposing. Now, it should go without saying that planning proposals are assessed independently on their independent merit against the provisions of the planning framework. And the past discussions with other parties are simply not a relevant planning consideration. So we did have some concerns with this and were communicated with the council officers who dismissed our concerns. We did make changes to the design following that DRP. We increased landscaping, we improved the way in which pedestrian paths were laid out on the site, we changed the external design of the car wash building, as Reece mentioned. The DRP, in their view, we had not addressed their primary concerns. At the second DRP, I explained to the DRP that the master plan is not intended to inform the structure plan. However, I was told by the DRP, who were not planners, that they don't have 20 years of planning experience, that was the wrong approach. Now, that is disappointing because the structure plan documents, as I've mentioned in our presentation summary with the excerpt provided, quite clearly states that the master plan does not inform the structure plan and is not to be used in a planning assessment. This has unfortunately flavoured the entire DRP's approach to this proposal, resulting in the outcome. There were other concerning quotes mentioned by Reece that when taken together, there can be no doubt that the DRP has not acted in an impartial and independent manner. The WAPC guidelines on the exercise of planning discretion require that decision makers exercise discretion in an objective way. However, the DRP has quite clearly been approaching this matter in a subjective way. So for that reason, the DRP's review cannot and should not be taken into account by the decision maker. Our own assessment into the planning for the site finds that the built form and landscaping conforms to all requirements of the structure plan. This includes detailed and well-presented elevations, articulations to avoid blank facades, service areas away from entries clearly defined and accessible via pathways. These are all things that have come out directly from the structure plan and which our design has responded to. In short, we've achieved everything that's required of us for a contemporary car-based service commercial development within a service commercial precinct. And the application warrants refusal. Sorry, slip of the tongue there. It certainly warrants an approval. There's no doubt in my mind. The regulations
up, or just wrap up, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you for coordinating and arranging the Regulation 13 responses. Draft conditions, we're satisfied with those draft conditions should the DAP be minded to approve it, subject to the removal of condition 9 as explained in our note. And I'd be happy to answer any questions on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ross. And Reece, panel members, are there any questions of the two presenters? No? Great.
It's just going back to your comment about the separation distances, your station compared to the school, and you said met the guidelines that are required. Can you just expand on that a bit? Because it's my understanding that it was closer than the guidelines.
So in terms of being close to the guide, we've addressed it to the boundary of the site of the primary school. So that's where we've said, okay, at the boundary of the primary school, if a building was built to that point, that's where we'd be. It's unlikely we expect that the primary school will build buildings to that point. What we've seen, there is no planning around the primary school at this point in time, so we've taken the worst case scenario.
So there is no school layout yet?
No school layout. So what we've done is we've gone to the boundary of the school and said, well, and the same has been done with our acoustic report, is what we've done is gone to the boundary rather than say, well, we expect a building might be 10, 15, 20 metres in. What is that at the boundary? We might be as minor under there, but it's unexpected that a school will build hard up against the boundary. But we also note as well, as I made mention of, is at the very high level structure planning, it's been identified this site for as a service station. So we also expect at some point in time that the consideration of the two uses being there is an appropriate use, noting there will be a boulevard and setbacks of both buildings within their sites as required.
So just going back to the guidelines and the separation, what's the distance that you have set back compared to the guidelines?
Off the top of my head, I couldn't answer that, but I expect it would be at 50 metres. And I know that for a fact that we've just recently had a child care centre approved near a petrol station. It's outside 50 metres, and that is generally the accepted positioning. If you're a downwind from a petrol station, 50 metres is what the Department of Health require as a minimum.
So there was some analysis by Emerge Associates, attachment 9 to the agenda, and they calculated the distance between the bowser and the road itself, which is 25 metres, and an indicative 15 metres to a primary school building. Combined, that's more than 50 metres.
The submission from the Education Department seemed to indicate that based on guidelines, environmental guidelines, that for some reason a 24/7 service station is likely to have more impact than I don't know, something that works regular hours or.
We've had this raised on a number of our approvals. With the vapour recovery processes that are under modern petrol stations, the impact is not what is expected. The guidelines that are set are still from a fair way back. As our view is, Department of Education, they continue to raise this, and I think other uses such as fast food as concerns near primary schools. From my perspective, if they really have a concern of these things, this should be dealt with at a higher level where planning policies about what should be set back. This has been addressed under the relevant guidelines from the Department of Health. And as we've done, we've provided evidence that it is satisfactory. And based on what else has been constructed and other examples within the metropolitan area, this is an acceptable outcome.
That's to your point, the difference between the 50 and 200 simply the nighttime operations, which of course the school doesn't operate at night. So no real basis to impose a 200 metre setback in this particular circumstance.
I should also point, you do have to get a dangerous goods licence as well. So every petrol station has to go and get a licence to that. That deals with things like refuelling of the Bowsers, etc., and the timeframes to do that. That also is addressed with how they do that around traffic management. Consideration of operational uses is taken into account. So if the petrol station won't be wanting to fill Bowsers at 8:30 in the morning when the kids are being dropped off, because one, it's a traffic issue, and two, it's not a sensible thing to do. So, and they'll be doing it outside of hours when there's no one around anyway.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Catalano?
Yes, thank you. So first of all, you say that the proposal hasn't really been done. I think the word, I can't remember the exact words, but basically haven't been given fair consideration. Is that what you're sort of saying?
Yeah, that's right, Councillor Catalano. And it's not our usual experience with DRPs. We're involved in matters that go before DRPs for many of our projects, and I think this particular one was quite egregious in the way that the DRP went about it. And I think it's just a circumstance that they were seeking to protect some perceived agreements or things that didn't involve us at all before we even were involved in the site.
Sorry, yeah, go on.
As I should also point out, as we've noted, the design review panel is just an advisory board to the council staff. The council staff, we don't believe, have actually made their own assessment against the 10 principles that relied solely on the design review panel. But throughout their report, they note that they're satisfied that our development complies with everything that it is required to comply with.
Okay, I just wanted to sort of drill down a bit as to why you think the petrol station on that site is not something that. I mean, it seems that they're not there. It's about the petrol station on the site, is it? Do you think ultimately?
That's correct. We believe that from the commentary of the design review panel was that they, well, full stop, they don't support further development of petrol stations in the metropolitan area. And they,
right. Okay. And they don't support it because it's next to the school. Is that correct?
No, it's because they support electric vehicles as the way forward, and their exact statement was it is inherently unsustainable insofar as it services legacy vehicles users and supports car use in general. Unfortunately, as we all know, the Bullsbrook Town Centre site is not connected to an extensive public transport network, and as Cameron mentioned before, 77% of everyone within Bullsbrook will travel by car to work each day. So the use is entirely appropriate and entirely considered under the structure plan.
But the thing is that people are still using petrol cars. So is that the only reason you think that they want to refuse the petrol station on the basis of the design at this location? Are there any other reasons why you think this design this petrol station is being refused?
The only reasons they raised was the proposed use being a petrol station and they did not believe that the design of the petrol station or the development as a whole was in keeping with the rural nature of the town centre. Yet when comparing that to the McDonald's or the childcare centre or the gym next door, we've gone over and above in terms of our aesthetic treatment and our landscaping and setbacks to make sure.
Okay, and we know that that's going to be 40,000 people living there, so it's not exactly going to be rural in the future either.
Agreed.
Okay, so I guess my other question now is, can a petrol station be approved at that site in the future at all?
The town planning scheme currently designates the use as it's an entirely approvable use under the town planning scheme and under the structure plan, and it is considered a use that should be located in that site under the structure plan and the town planning scheme.
The structure plan says this is a service commercial precinct and explicitly identifies a petrol station using those words within the structure plan for the site.
Exactly. So, you know, we've got the design panel refusing or not, providing these reasons for it not being located there. So is this going to be a permanent impediment, do you think, to the development of a petrol station on that site?
No, my view is it's a personal opinion of the design review panel, and as Ross pointed out, they have not taken into consideration the correct and proper planning framework in their assessment of the application.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, any further questions? I do have questions. Firstly, you did say that there's no plan for the school. And I have read the technical note for the emissions, and I'm surprised it's only 50 metres that you're talking about in a general sense, a generic sense. Most of them are around about the 200 metres as a generic buffer. During the course of you've said it's a use that's permissible, but in the master plan and the policy and the structure plans, it says service stations are permissible, but it does require an assessment against the planning framework and policies, and SPP 4.1 talks about sensitive land uses. You did a technical note which doesn't really go into vapor modelling or anything like that of the site. Did you consider that up front?
The reason we haven't considered vapor modelling is we believe we're compliant, as we've noted in the technical note. If we weren't compliant under the technical note, we would have undertaken vapor modelling. And
did the council staff say that they didn't require?
No, and council staff have noted in the RAR that they're satisfied that all off-site impacts, including odour, noise, and light, have been appropriately addressed.
Okay. All right. And your talk about the design review panel, I presume their discussion about sustainability under design principle 5, I think it was. Principle 5, sustainability, they talk about use not being compatible. Wording, proposed use is inherently unsustainable insofar as it services legacy vehicles. That's the issue you were raising, wasn't it?
That is the issue. And I also note in each of the design review panels, the design review panel under sustainability, which is item 5 of the design review, they've said no discussion. They have not discussed it. In every one of our applications that went to the design review panel, there was a discussion on sustainability that they chose to ignore.
Okay.
And we actually raised issues in there. We will be doing sustainable materials, recycling of water, electrification of building services, otherwise native landscaping, bike racks and PV cells, among other things that we've been considering.
There's a recommended condition as well on sustainability report. Okay.
I'm just going to let you know Heidi's just dropped off. We're just trying to get her back.
Okay. All right. Thanks. I don't have any further questions at this stage. We're just waiting on one of the panel.
Could I ask another question.
Yes.
I'm just going back to condition or draft condition 9 and the requirement for an operational management plan. Remind me why that's not an appropriate thing at all.
The short answer is it hasn't been recommended by the noise consultant. The slightly longer answer is there's been a model undertaken that considers all noise generating activities operating concurrently. So all the car wash bays in use, all the houses in use, a refrigerator truck parking, car door noise, everything all happening all at once. And it says that provided we do the two things that are addressed by condition 8, so there's doors on the car wash and a noise wall, then we meet the requirements under the regulations. So there's no management or operational things that we need to do in order to achieve compliance.
Let's say that there's people out there in their cars playing music or whatever. Is there a management response needed to deal with those sort of issues? And that would be part of that management plan.
I think if there's an issue such as that, it's really a matter for the city's EHO to address through the noise regulations. So we can't control playing music in the car, for instance, and that could happen on any premises, at the gym, at the shopping centre. There's nothing particular about this particular proposal that raises that as a concern.
It's a fairly standard condition, in my view, for these sorts of operations. Have you not experienced that before in terms of?
So as I said, I've developed a large number of petrol stations. I haven't provided a management plan in this regard because, as Ross said, normally as we do with our acoustic reports, we take the worst case scenario. And if there's any recommendations that come out of that, what we need to do, sometimes it'll say you need to turn the refrigeration truck off when they're unloading. So that happens. In this situation, it's been you need to have roller doors on the car wash and the acoustic wall, which is a semi-permeable acoustic wall on the corner. That's all it's required to do to make sure at the worst case scenario that we are compliant. So we're not saying that the acoustic report hasn't said you need to ensure that you turn the trucks off. It's assuming that everything is ongoing and we still comply with those construction issues which are dealt with under the building licence.
And that is a worst case scenario. So rarely would everything all be happening all at once.
Okay, and just going on from that, I presume you've got protocols, or the operator of the service station will have protocols that if there are complaints made, they would act on them?
They would, yes.
Okay. All right, any further questions? Heidi, you're back, thank you. Do you have any questions of the presenters?
Hang on. Okay, not at this time, thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, thanks very much. We may get back to you if we need some clarification issues. I'll move over to the local government officers and seek any response to some of the comments that are made before we ask pointed questions of you. Do you want to make that, or do you want to wait for the questions?
The city's happy to wait for any questions that the panel may have.
Thank you. In that case, I'll ask panel members if they have any questions of the City of Swan staff. Sorry, I've got David Tompkin and Jonathan Lendich, do I?
That's correct.
Mr. Russell's there?
He's absent today.
Okay. Okay. Panel members, any questions? Yes, Councillor Zanino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a pertinent question, I think, is why didn't the city ask for vapour modelling from the applicants?
Go with the previous stuff around. Yeah, through your presiding member, the city in the past have requested this information a number of years ago. However, through liaising with the government agencies such as DPERD and DWER, the city was comfortable that a technical note which addresses the type of methods used to address vapour, such as the vapour recovery emission systems used on all new developments of this nature, was satisfactory in response to addressing the state planning policy, noting that through the risk assessment and the odour management through the works approval, through the Department of Prime Industries, they would need to obtain their own separate goods works approval for that. So in theory, they responded to all the required elements to address vapour, noting that they'll need to obtain a separate technical approval in order to operate on the site in any event.
I have a question.
Yes. Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you. Is there any reason why the city didn't do its own evaluation of the 10 design principles from state planning policy 7?
So with regards to our own assessment, so the purpose of the design review panel is to provide expert advice regarding the proposed design and if it's a good design outcome. So obviously we aren't experts from a design perspective, so our assessment is largely influenced by the comments received from our design review panel. That is the purpose of why they're there. So the recommendation for refusal based on the fact that it doesn't satisfy the 10 design principles, it's not the design review panel that's making that recommendation, it's us undertaking our own assessment based on their comments as design experts.
Is it, with regard to the reason that it doesn't demonstrate that it fulfills the 10 design principles, what's missing for me, and you might be able to explain why, what's missing for me is what are the planning impacts of fulfilling the 10 design principles? Because the principles are not tick box principles. There are variations in and nuances in how you may or may not satisfy those principles. So what's the reason, apart from saying it doesn't satisfy a planning policy?
So the intent of state planning policy 7.0 is to encourage design of the built environment, particularly in emerging areas such as the Kingsford town site. So I guess, again, based off the expert design advice, they aren't satisfied that it satisfies all 10 design principles.
I think in reviewing the proposal and where it's come from the start, there were comments made by the panel in the context of the land use and appropriateness of the use. Through the concept and the lodgement of the application, we worked with both the panel and the applicant in order to address the comments, in order to focus the design review comments on the design elements only, where following the initial review, the panel decided that the comments relating to the design were the key issues and not the land use, and they worked with the applicant in order to address some of those small changes recommended, as per some of the recent correspondence attached to the proposal regarding minor amendments such as better articulation to the building, the better use of the parklet area and landscaping, all small recommendations which would go a long way in order to satisfy those principles, noting there were some bits and pieces done by the applicant which do go a long way in addressing certain elements. It was the panel's view and also the city's view that there was still some small things that could have been done in order to achieve compliance with a number of those principles, but there wasn't enough done in order to be able to support it in its current form.
But the reason given is, as you say, is the city's reason, not the design review panel's reason. And do you think it would have been important for the city to articulate that reason a little further?
Yeah, when you read the advice by the panel and the city noting in the RAR that we take advice
and use their advice as a catalyst for our recommendation. The key comments around the changes that could have been undertaken on the design were very minor, and these are recommended as small things which would have achieved a support, or at least go a long way to achieving or demonstrating compliance. So where the city's advice comes from is purely based on the recommendations from the panel, with the city agreeing with those small elements that could have been resolved in order to achieve support from the city itself.
So you don't think there could have been an approval with conditions to satisfy those small deficiencies?
Even with the conditions, it was more so on several occasions we made recommendations to the applicant of changes that they could incorporate that would put us in a stronger position to support the application. Those changes weren't onboarded. So if we were to include conditions requiring design changes to be made prior to the issuance of a building permit or prior to the issuance of an occupancy permit, if they weren't willing to comply with these conditions, then essentially it would just hold up the development.
Okay, thank you. I note your comments about the small design changes. Did you discuss with the applicants said you discussed with the applicants, but they weren't prepared to make changes? Did you discuss things like pitch roof on the bowsers, over the bowsers, the canopy over the bowsers, and the retail outlet at the service station? Did you discuss that with them?
Yeah, so in the recommendations from the design review panel's chair report, which was provided to the applicant, they set out a list of recommendations, include diagrams, marked diagrams listing the changes that could be incorporated, which would then satisfy, result in a satisfactory design, which would then put us in a stronger position to support the proposal. So this was sent to the applicant, and which they essentially chose to ignore and didn't include.
Okay. And in terms of design principle number 5, the comments about unsustainable use of fossil fuel vehicles, not in their words, of course. How did you see that they didn't comply with that?
Sorry, can you repeat yourself?
I said, in terms of condition 5, principle 5, design principle 5, areas for improvement, they made comment about the use of combustible engines and so forth. Did you agree with that as well?
No, the city doesn't agree with that element regarding sustainability. However, we've seen a lot of service stations where these comments come up considerably. However, where the comments lean towards with regards to sustainability is the provision or future provision for a number of bays, possibly to have EV charging capabilities. So allowing for, a number of bays on site in the future to accommodate this type of use, where that goes hand in hand with the other recommendations, such as greater use of parklets and facilities for people to stay on site at certain times, is where those comments generally lean towards. So where the sustainability measures haven't been met, the comments relating to those fossil fuels would more often than not relate to the lack of EV infrastructure in the future, whilst also, comments and recommendations around the use of PV sustainable initiatives throughout the development, which was requested initially and wasn't responded to by the proponent in the level expected to satisfy that principle. However, as you'll note in the R13 recommendation, a sustainability strategy is recommended as a condition in order to resolve that.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions of the presenters, of the council staff? Sorry, Heidi, you have any questions? Doesn't sound like. Can you hear us, Heidi? No? Okay, thank you. All right, well, we've gone through that process, and now we can move on into the debate on the item. In order to do so, we have a recommendation for refusal. Do I have a mover? No mover. Okay, the recommendation for refusal lapses for want of a mover and seconder, of course. So we now move on to the alternate recommendation that we were provided with, recommendation for approval with conditions. Do I have a mover and seconder for that? Mover, Mr. Hyam. A seconder? I'll second that. Oh, sensed it. Councillor Zanino. Okay, yes, Clayton, you wish to speak to the other.
Thank you. I normally have great respect for design review panel process and how they contribute to improving the design of various structures. And while I don't disrespect this design review, what concerns me is it seems that they have misunderstood or misinterpreted the planning framework. And that's where we need to start with any development on this site. Quite clearly, the intent was or is for vehicle-based activities or developments in this location. The service station is a use which can be permitted. Car wash is in fact a permitted use on the site. And so then I couple that with the responsible authority report, and all the way through there is support for these two uses. But in the end, there's a decision not to support because it doesn't match or fulfill the design principles of state planning policy number 7. Again, it's unfortunate because I think just a bold statement like that is not helpful in making a decision. I think if there is a recommendation for refusal on that basis, then it needs to explain what are the planning impacts of not meeting those design principles so that we can assess the likely impacts and whether or not we think it should be approved or refused. If I come back to the report of the officers, right through, they are saying it satisfies that, it satisfies that. So I'm quite happy to support this proposal. I note the concerns of the applicant over an operational management plan, but I think in the circumstances, it's a very minor issue to deal with from the applicant's point of view. It's quite a simple plan that needs to be put in place. The only issue that I guess I'm still happy with it is the emission of vapours. However, I'm prepared to accept the technical note that says that the vapour issues are and can be addressed. I also note the letter from the Education Department, and while I understand their concerns, these issues or these uses were put in place a long time ago, and presumably those sort of issues were considered at the early planning stages. So, Mr Chairman, I'm happy to support the proposal as recommended for approval with the conditions.
Thank you, Mr Hime. Councillor Zanino, as seconder, used to speak, please.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I concur with most of what my colleague, Mr Higgins, has just said. Reading through the report, I dare say that just about everything the City of Swan has put forward basically complies. I mean, it's complies with the zoning and the land use. The only thing that I picked up, and I think everyone's picked up, is it didn't comply with the design principles. But I dare say that the design principles are a minor issue, the way I see it. The only thing that I could have possibly or would have liked to have seen more is the lack of the vapour modelling put forward, but I'm sure that as it's been stated, that will be compliant. But apart from that, I think that from what I can see, we've got very little grounds if this was to be appealed to refuse the application. I think the application complies with just about everything. And as I said, the minor details about the design principles can be complied with or sorted out. So on that basis, I'm happy to support the approval of the application.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Catalano, you wish to speak to the item?
Yes, I do. I want to actually just raise quite a few points, if only just because I think they're relevant. The main thing here is we seem to have it's very difficult because we've got a petrol station to be located next to a school, which, you know, common sense would say that's probably not a great outcome. And but unfortunately, the planning framework is up the creek. It is not suitable for reconciling that conflict. And that just brings us back to how important it is for local councils to actually really consider the impact of the you know, the master plan or the district plan, whatever the plan that comes before them, because those kind of contradictions need to be considered. But then I guess the most important thing is the state government, if they've got issues, the Department of Education has issues about petrol stations being located next to schools, then yes, the state government needs to start providing some planning advice to assist everybody, you know, resolve that contradiction. So we're obviously having a lot of difficulty today in getting to that place. And the other thing that really disturbed me, I mean, so I can't, you know, in some ways I find it very difficult to support a petrol station next to a school. I mean, it just doesn't seem to be, you know, appropriate. But at the same time, I get really disturbed when I hear arguments that really just basically boil down to social engineering. I mean, the fact is that this is peri-urban, very, very peri-urban. I mean, it's going to be high density. It's probably going to be low socio. I mean, people are going to use petrol cars. We cannot social engineer how people are going to be able to, you know, afford transport. And to sort of say, oh, well, you know, sustainability requires that we have only just EV, or this can't be approved because it doesn't have, you know, the EV facilities, or it isn't EV. I mean, that's putting the cart before the horse. We need to basically, you know, start doing much more than asking us at this site to start putting in the infrastructure that actually is wholly or mostly inappropriate for the kind of development that's going to go there, the kind of demographic that's going to end up living there. And then finally to suggest that it's a rural area, I mean, it's nonsense. This is going to be highly built up residential and industrial. So I just found the whole thing to be very unclear, and I just think it's very. I feel it's wrong to even put those arguments before this panel. So it's very conflicting. Ultimately, I find the proposal to be inappropriate, but that's my personal opinion. That isn't the planning framework. That isn't going to resolve all these other planning issues. And I think this is a really good example of how the state government, if it wants to start encouraging more EV use, if the local government wants to start encouraging more EV use, if the state government wants to start bringing in proper boundaries and separation between schools and petrol stations, it needs to do this at the higher level, not expect us to try and resolve it here. So I guess that's what I'm just trying to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Heidi, do you wish to speak to the item?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Following on from Councillor Catalano's remarks about the EV network, the reality is I believe that this proposal is appropriate for the location in the context of the overall sort of master planning for the area. Notwithstanding that the city was very clear in its remarks in the RER that from a transport perspective, that it was comfortable with the findings in the report. And that includes not just how the road traffic's accommodated into and out of the site, including fuel delivery vehicles, but also in terms of what the impacts are on the broader pedestrian cycling future public transport network. This is a master planned area. I think it's reasonable to expect this type of development to be located in an area such as this, particularly co-located with fast food drive-through restaurants, other commercial activities, particularly at the corner of two relatively major roads within the urban cell. In terms of the EV, I think that's a noble aim that many developers and councils are trying to promote, the reality is the primary network at present and for the foreseeable future for EV charging in WA is the WA EV network, which is underpinned by the state government. Potentially in the future, we may see private operators provide this type of service. I don't think it's reasonable to expect this one to stand out by comparison to potentially other applications within the city of Swan, either currently being considered or recently approved and constructed and commissioned. How is this proposal different from a number of others within the city of Swan and the Perth metropolitan area generally? It typically isn't, and for that particular reason, I think it's an appropriate use. I think the traffic can be accommodated. I think it liaises well with the adjacent land uses, and I support the application.
Thank you. I too support the application, have reservations about some aspects, but in supporting the application, I concur with other speakers that the proposal satisfies the intent of the Kingsford Town Centre Precinct Structure Plan. And whilst uses may be AA or P uses, it doesn't mean that they're automatically approved. They still have to comply with a number of other standards and policies that apply to land development in this state. So things like vehicle emissions and so forth, fuel vapor, they still have to be satisfied in any application. So in this case, I think land use was satisfied. The site planning and built form, whilst it didn't meet the design guidelines, the responsible authority report actually said that the scale of the service station and car wash are consistent with other developments within the Bullsbrook Town Centre. To me, then, that meant some of the detailed design issues needed to be worked through from the design review panel rather than making comments about the overall use on the site. Things like lot boundary setbacks, they comply with build form requirements. The signage was supported. The traffic access and parking within the to and from the site through the grid or the road network that's supplied and been thoroughly assessed at the strategic level. Internal traffic, there was talk about legibility of pedestrian access through the site. I noted on the plans there are designated pedestrian walking areas. I mean, it's very difficult in shopping centre car parks and service station forecourts to corral the pedestrians. They'll walk around like lost sheep most of the time. So as long as there is some element of assistance for pedestrians, which there is in this case on the site plan, that's been probably the best that can be done. In terms of emissions, I know the Department of Education objected. I had some reservations about the lack of odour modelling or emissions modelling. But in the end, I looked at the fact that the Education Department did not supply a site plan which could have informed us of some of the location of sensitive receptors. It probably means now that the Education Department has to look at its own site planning and overcome some of their concerns by perhaps putting things like car parking areas, pick up and drop off areas, landscaping, ovals, maybe administrative buildings or so forth in the so-called buffer area. Provision of electric vehicle charging stations, they can be retrofitted if there requires a lot of them, and I'm sure that'll happen in due course. The environmental noise assessment, well, once again, that is covered, and I'm happy with the fact that the proponents will have to comply. The issue of rural character, I think Councillor Catalano covered that quite well in saying that this is not a rural area. It may be now, but in long term it's going to be a heavily built up urban area, albeit recognising the heritage of the area, there may be elements of rural character incorporated within developments, street names, and maybe building designs if proponents want to do that. I note that there was talk on the design review panel about things like putting pitch roofs on the canopy and the retail outlet for the service station. I'm mindful of an application that we assessed some years ago on the corner of West Swan Road and Benara Road in Caversham. They were proposed with flat roof canopy and flat roof retail outlet, and the proponents kindly agreed to putting pitch roofs on it. And I think it's from a design and amenity, visual amenity, it's far better than most service stations that are provided. So I encourage the proponents to consider that, although I'm sure there's a cost element in it, but being altruistic developers, they might consider doing that. Similarly, I know that there was talk about the parklet on the northern side. That would have involved shifting the location of the retail outlet further south, with the loss of 3 car bays, which shown for staff parking. I, for one, wouldn't have seen that as being inappropriate because it would have increased the parklet size on the northern side of the proposed convenience store. Maybe that's something else that the proponents may wish to look at, but given that we're not here to design for the proponents or the design review panel, if these are things that are best considered by the proponents. Given that, I'm supportive of the application and we'll look forward to it occurring in the future. Thank you. All right, having said that, I will go back to the mover to close debate on the item.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. Very briefly, I think everybody has raised really good, interesting points. I think in an ideal world, we wouldn't have planned it this way. The master planning would be slightly different, I would suggest. You wouldn't have a school adjacent to uses like this. But having said that, and as we've all said, it's supportable and it's satisfied all those requirements. So without further ado, I'll wind up there.
Thank you. Okay, well, we have a recommendation for approval with conditions on the alternate recommendation. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? Heidi? Against? Okay, it's carried 4-1. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda. We have Form 2 DAP application Ziranan, item 5, SAP reconsideration Ziranan, and Part D on the agenda, other business. There is listed a SAT appeal. Item 2, meeting closure, and we'll close the meeting at 11:04 a.m. Thank you, presenters, submitters, panel members and council staff and our support team. Thank you very much.